spreads grow. Yeah, I guess good week.
Yes.
After missing last week. Bitcoin recorded, its highest ever week at close, and the USD fell 10.7% in June, which is the worst fall since the Nixon administration moved off the gold standard back in 73.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal, actually. I just want to stop there for a bit. I mean, like that, there was a clear catalyst for the fall back in 73. They decided to say this to the gold guys and go, you know what, we're not doing that anymore. And so it kind of made sense. But okay, so why is it happening today? Like, we haven't done anything like that. But the answer is, Trump is dicking around with policy and tariffs, and people just have lost confidence completely in the USD. I don't know. That was an eye opener for me. I sat up and paid attention when I saw that stat.
So is it just because Trump's being a lunatic? Is that the reason?
Yeah, I guess so. And everything that flows on from there. So he's doing these crazy things. He's so unpredictable, I suppose. People just don't know what he's going to do. He keeps putting on tariffs. He keeps putting off tariffs. We'll talk about tariffs again, in a bit. What else is he doing? He clearly wants the Fed to lower rates, right? That's sort of, he's not trying to hide that at all. He's talking about, getting rid of, I don't think he's talking about getting rid of Powell yet, maybe, overtly, but, that's clearly on the cards, is looking for his Fed Powell successor. And the obvious answer to a successor here is that we're going to have lower rates coming quicker. Now, whether the rates are going to come soon or even sooner is kind of the question.
Yep.
So, and rates go lower, and the obvious answer there is people don't want to invest in the USD anymore because they can't earn as much interest. So that just pushes the price down. It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy.
But despite all that, US jobs data is showing lowered odds of a recession. So the strong data came through, boosting investor sentiment. So the US dollar seems to be losing its mind, and Bitcoin is potentially reaping all the benefits.
Well, yeah, big job numbers kind of would suggest in a normal market that you wouldn't lower interest rates at all. But it's kind of, people are sort of, thinking, well, it doesn't really matter what happens exogenously. The direction from the top is we want to lower rates because Trump wants to heat things up.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so the big question: how does it benefit from all this chaos?
It benefits big time in the short term, definitely. As people are getting, they're uncertain of how the USD is going to react and what it's going to be worth, and are they going to be able to store their wealth there? Things like Bitcoin and gold go up for sure. When rates go down, there's more money sloshing around in the market, so Bitcoin goes up like it did last time.
And going completely off script, because I know you hate it, mostly, Elon Musk obviously had the fracture with Trump, and they were pals. Now they're not so much pals anymore. But he's starting, what's it called, the America Party or America First Party or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was asked specifically, going, well, what's this mean for the fiat world? He's like, something along the lines of, well, fiat's not doing a good job. So in relation to Bitcoin, definitely.
Yeah, so someone said to him,
maybe.
I was slightly prepared for this, by the way.
Oh.
Someone in that I just read it. someone said, will you, what's your sort of stance on crypto? Are you going to be a pro-crypto party? And he said,
that's right.
And he basically said, well, fiat is hopeless at this point. So, draw your own conclusion.
Yeah, right.
And to me, that makes perfect sense. Obviously the last election with Trump, crypto was a big player in that, and a big player in Trump's winning. And so it seemed, you'd be crazy as especially a new political party supposed to be, progressive and forward thinking and whatnot, to not include crypto in your mandate, because it's obviously a massive, it's a single voter issue.
Yeah, crazy. Now, all right, we'll keep going on. So the other highlight, I guess, for the week, the Bitcoin ETF inflows, 50 billion US. With really low implied volatility, in fact, lowest since October 23. So what can we take away from that?
I think it's the same as last time, to be honest. We talked about the massive Bitcoin inflows, massive Ethereum inflows as well. Everyone's kind of using the product as it's supposed to be used in my eyes. Obviously, I tend towards the maxi viewpoint, but everything's going crazy. And it's actually interesting. I can sort of relate that back to what we're seeing on the OTC desk. So if you look at exchange volumes, they're quite low at the moment across the board. Volatility is super low. I don't know if you're watching the price on the weekend. I've always got a screen up somewhere. and it was just flat. It was just completely flat. I think it moved sort of, less than a few $100, high to low kind of thing across the weekend. And then finally Sunday night, Australian time, it picked up, and we're kind of there at the moment. But yeah, even despite this low activity on the order book and on the exchange, OTC desk has been humming. So we've been doing lots of deals. So it seems to me that what conclusions do you draw from that? Retail is sort of waiting for something to happen. Institutions are probably trying to play a bit of catch up. I reckon a lot of them are sort of looking at all these treasury companies. We'll talk about treasury companies a bit later as well. But a lot of treasury companies are sort of, putting their words into action right now. And that kind of stuff takes ages, right? You don't just one day wake up and go, I'm going to become a treasury company. There's so much involved in convincing, the board and organising all the different paperwork and nonsense that you have to do. So this stuff takes ages to get in. And I reckon a bunch of that stuff was happening a while ago, and now we're seeing kind of the results where the companies are coming in and allocating.
Yeah, we have an example, and again, I'm not going to ask you a random question. I'm going to stick to the order.
That's fine.
That's not true. I'm going to jump around definitely at some point. But okay, first one. So ETFs, we touched on them. So the big news this week, so from CNBC. So we're seeing some significant inflows. The Nick effect is really kicking across the base, kicking across the world. The investor market in general has once again listened. ETH ETFs has gained 219 million US last week. And 1.3 billion has flowed in from other chains. So there's a lot of activity, and there's some really positive commentary around, I guess, Ethereum in particular. Fundstrat.
Yeah.
Tom Lee from Fundstrat has predicted 10K ETH price. So, I guess that'll be better than the 1% or so we're up from on the last 5 years from here. But
funny stat actually. Charlie Lee, the creator of Litecoin,
yes,
and Tom Lee actually are completely unrelated.
What about Lee Eaton?
Oh, yeah, how are you involved?
No relation.
Bobby, I'm not sure you remember a guy called Bobby Lee.
Bobby Lee?
So he is some other crypto guy. I haven't heard of him in ages, but he's Charlie Lee's brother.
Right.
But Lee Eaton, the jury's out.
Yeah, well, I lived in Korea for a year, and I told people my name was Lee. It was never confusing. In fact, when I go to Singapore this day, people don't still call me Lee because it's too weird, I guess. Singapore, everyone calls me Eaton. Yeah. Because it's less weird somehow. Even when I sign off my emails, Lee, they'll be like, thank you, Eaton. Because it's not possible that someone could be called Lee.
As their first name.
As their first name. If your name was John Smith and you kept signing off as Smith or something, I'd say, okay, John.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of that thing.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. So, okay, ETH pumping. So there was some stuff actually. Anything else to talk about? I guess the interest in the ETFs, but there's also been a lot of interest. And the thing is, I kind of get the Bitcoin thing in ETFs, but the Ethereum thing in ETFs, I get less because you kind of need the ETH, or you need this. They're talking about Solana ETFs as well. I kind of feel like you need to hold those assets. Like, what good are they in ETFs? Like, even less than Bitcoin, right?
Because they're a gas token, you mean?
Well, you got to use them for things, right?
Well,
I guess
for gas.
Well, yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. What if you want to use ETH to go buy something or use it on chain?
How's that different from Bitcoin?
True, but there's a lot more on-chain activity, or the layer 2 stuff. There's a lot more of the layer 2 ecosystem on ETH than there is on Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I mean, I see your point with gas. So that's sort of, the original, and Bitcoin is the gas for the Bitcoin network as well, to be fair. But, obviously there's a lot other things you can do with Ethereum that require it as gas. But for me, the real kicker here, and sort of, people will be doing this 100%, is these ETFs, the staking ETFs. Because, you can use it for gas, and maybe you need to keep a bit on your wallet. I mean, at the moment, gas is so cheap. You can hold like 0.1 of an ETH and you'll be fine for ages. You'll never run out, kind of thing. But if you can get an ETF that also earns yields, it's paying a yield, that's a killer for me, because you can't do that with Bitcoin, really.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Maybe it wasn't a good question.
No, it's a good question.
I'll just take the question back.
Yeah.
Pretend
it's already out there.
Just disregard that, jury. All right, US. Okay, next. We've touched on this, but let's get into more detail. So US delays major tariff decision. Oh, shocked me, because they haven't made a decision. The tariffs on again, off again. And Musk launches new party. Again, we sort of touched on this stuff. To the extent that, I guess, that impacts the crypto markets. So the tariff freeze has been extended to 1 August. But rates were imposed on several Asian countries.
Yeah, so I don't know. I never honestly, when I read these kind of things, I usually just gloss over it because you just know that next week the placard's going to be different. The thing that kind of interested me about this story was the way that the US are now sort of, and I guess they've been doing it for a while, but they're really coming forward and saying, hey, you better come and talk to us, or we might do some tariffs on you. Like, you better, hey, you over there, have you come and talk to us about, and it really seems a bit more desperation in the way, in kind of the messaging.
Didn't quite pan out the way they were hoping.
Yeah, and they really want, because they don't, it's bad. The reality is the tariffs aren't on other countries. The tariffs are on the American people, right? So the US, it's in their best interest to have these other countries come and negotiate so everyone can have lower tariffs and everyone feels good about, what they've done. So the US are really, I think they sat there and launched this huge thing, and countries like Australia, were knocking in their boots and quickly we're like, oh, how do we negotiate? And we did it. It worked last time, and let's try and do it again. And like, if some countries are kind of like, especially the big ones, are holding out, and the US are like, oh man, that didn't work out. And so now they're trying to goad them into negotiating so that everyone wins.
Yeah, some reverse psychology. Yeah, you can't negotiate.
Totally.
Good work, Trump. All right, Elon's political threat. So we touched a little bit earlier. Elon Musk's party, America Party. Now you have to pretend like you're an expert political commentator.
Yeah,
I'm sure you're well versed.
Engaging political mode.
So is that going to get any votes?
I don't know. To be honest, it seems a bit like something that people have forgotten about in a couple of months. I'm not sure. I'm not really plugged into that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Is it required? I mean, I see a lot of people saying all it's going to do is suck votes out of the Republican vote, and then everyone, the Democrats are going to stay the Democrats, and it'll just, it's just a vampire attack on themselves kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that seems to make sense. I don't know how it'll actually turn out. You never know. Maybe Musk will pay everyone $2,000 this time or whatever to vote for his party, and and that's all he has to do every time to stay in power.
Is that like the American trumpet of patriots?
Yeah. Yeah.
Trumpet of patriots. I remember when Clive Palmer came out with the trumpets of patriots, and it was clearly such a, hey, Elon Musk is doing this thing, and how do I just grab at something? Because the term trumpet of patriots doesn't even make sense. Patriots with trumpets, but no, the trumpet of the patriots.
Yeah, okay. It's like a mouthpiece.
So let's get into let's all get behind a trumpet. All right, July 14th declared Crypto Week in the US House. The Grand Old Party to hold Crypto Week to consider Genius and Clarity and the anti-CBDC bills. The House is expected to adopt the Genius Act over the older stable bill. So this is kind of wrapping up what we've talked about for the last month, 2 months really.
So I think catalyst here was that big beautiful bill that everyone's sort of been talking about has passed. They've finished discussing it. I think that it's not law yet, but it's it's happening. And so now they're kind of deciding to move on to something else. And there's a bunch of crypto bills that have to go in. So I think we spoke about this previously as well. Trump has said he wants the stablecoin bill on his desk by August. We're getting pretty close to August, and these things never move quickly, as you know. So there's two. I don't know how much we want to get into this. It's kind of boring, to be honest, but there's two stablecoin bills, Genius and Stable. The Genius one sort of was further ahead, so I think everyone's just like, let's just do that one because it's closer to getting done, and that way they've got more chance of getting it on Trump's table. Differences between the two are fairly minor. There's nothing really big to talk about there. The second bill is the Clarity Bill. This one's more about sort of designating, who looks after crypto. So there's always been fights in that space between the SEC and the CFTC, and this lays down some rules about who actually should be looking after various different types of tokens, I suppose. And it also sort of has, other rules around how exchanges have to run, and people who are working in crypto have to, segregate customer funds and all this kind of stuff that seems like a no-brainer and is already mandated in the traditional finance sector. It just sort of brings those kind of rules, those basic safety rules, really, for customers into the forefront. Some
clarifications, some basic sort of maturity stuff. Like now you're an adult, you have to tuck your pants in.
Totally,
and, do tie up and stop wearing your hats backwards.
Yeah, and the third one's about...
So that was a dig at Jared because he always wears his hat backwards. But I guess you can't on the camera see Joe with his hat on backwards.
Yeah, the third one, he's just flipping it frontwards now in shame. The third one is about the CBDC. So that's kind of interesting one. Like the maxi in me is sort of like, air pumping, fist pumping, because they're basically saying they're legislating that you cannot offer a CBDC to individuals, which is cool. Like CBDCs are obviously the devil, and they're the loss of freedom and loss of privacy and loss of this and that. So that kind of interesting. I hope that one gets through. For me, like I'm going to do a hot take here. For me, the CBDCs are something that's probably inevitable. Like you think about like Star Trek or Star. Geez, I'm sorry to the Star Trek fans and the Star Wars fans out there, but Star Trek, I think I'm thinking of, where they have like a globalized money called credits. I think it is, and like this is the futurism. This is what the people writing Star Trek decided what it would be like in the future, and I think that's makes sense, right? Like why wouldn't you settle on one currency? And obviously it's going to be digital, and obviously there's a lot of sort of obvious things that they're going to do. So CBDCs seem obvious to me, seem inevitable, but the longer we can kind of push them back, I think the better.
Yeah, the idea, I mean, having bureaucrats kind of run the money, maybe private markets aren't great for it, but definitely having bureaucrats I don't think is a better option. Completely off topic, but it's funny to have in the UK. I guess we see this. Not the UK, sorry, the EU. You always talk about these unelected bureaucrats kind of running stuff, and the EU has this kind of like uber bureaucracy that kind of runs all the European Union now.
Yeah,
and it just makes you wonder. Eventually, like you're talking about here, the idea that eventually they're like, well, we should be controlling all these aspects of your life. We should also be controlling your money too, because we're bureaucrats. We know.
Yeah. You don't know how to spend your own money.
You don't know how to.
Let us help you.
You can't be trusted with yourself. I don't know if this is. We're getting way off topic here. And maybe before we get in the next news article, we'll have to talk about the party as well as things. We're diverging completely off topic. But I remember seeing even something on last night. It was talking about how like the government was going to mandate you have to spend like 3 hours a day with your pet. Like these silly laws. It's like, how are you even going to enforce that? Yeah.
It reminds me of the COVID thing where they're like, if you get a positive test,
you've
got to report it.
It doesn't make sense. It's like, why do you even think that way? Yeah. That is completely off topic. All right, so back on track before we talk about the party later on. Bit Digital becomes a major ETH treasury company. So Bit Digital sold its Bitcoin and used $266 million to buy 100,603 ETH.
Yeah, I didn't have heaps of Bitcoin, but and I feel like numbers are always thrown around and it's hard to get context. So I thought I'd bring a bit of context into this. Like a month or two ago, we spoke about, I think one of the first companies, that's that French company.
Oh yeah, the real estate company.
Yeah, and what was it called? Interparticulars or something like that. Became like the ETH treasury company, and they were like, honking their horn and shouting at everyone and like, we're going to buy like 1.5 million euros worth, and we're going to get another and I think they ended up buying like about 1,000 or 1,100 Ethereum, and these guys come along and just buy over 100,000 Ethereum. So yeah, this is a pretty big deal. I think like these guys have really thrown everything at this one. What was that?
It's a cough.
Okay. So I don't know. Like these are big numbers.
They're really ripping in.
There's another company as well. This is Bit Digital. There's also Bit Mining. I think is doing the same thing, which is funny because these are like mining companies, right? So they're predominantly Bitcoin mining companies, and they're going, oh, we've kind of missed this. Like Saylor has taken all the fun out of Bitcoin. Let's do something else. And they're doing Ethereum, which you can't mine Ethereum obviously, but you can earn yield off Ethereum, as I've said before. So they're killing it. But yeah, I don't know. We have spoken about it. There's an ongoing meme on this show, if you're a new listener, that I'm some kind of Ethereum maxi, or not maxi, but
you're the Ethereum whisperer.
I keep saying how Ethereum's got all this good stuff going for it.
And it does.
And it just, every week, more good news comes in. And I mean, and as I've said these previous weeks as well, Ethereum bag holders have been eating shit for 2 years. And they still are really, like nothing's really
only
changed.
Back to where the previous high was. We haven't really eclipsed and passed the previous high.
No, absolutely. We're still, it's a holding pattern for years now, but I don't know. I feel like something's coming. This is not financial advice, but yeah, I don't know. The stars are starting to align. I mean, they're lining all across crypto except for the alts, of course. Alts will continue to eat shit for however long is required. But yeah, I don't know. I think something's good's happening.
Something good is happening. All right. Well, the ETH whisperer has spoken.
Yeah.
Okay. So we need to find. We need some inside word here on Solana. So Solana ETF approval being fast-tracked. The SEC, so CoinDesk is reporting that the SEC has asked Solana ETF issuers to amend filings by the end of July. And analysts view this as a sign to get faster approvals.
Yeah.
So ETF, we might see a Sol ETF coming through soon too as well.
Yeah, so I thought this was cool. I'm not sure. I think we spoke about it previous time. There was another Solana ETF that kind of did this backdoor process to get itself on board and live. So Rex Financial and Osprey did this weird sort of thing where they reversed it into the Caymans, and by doing this funny little maneuver, they didn't have to fill out a 19B form, which is what all the other guys have to do, like to do a normal ETF, and that whole process takes ages. And so they basically short-circuited the whole thing.
Right.
By the fact that they turned it into a yield, like a staking ETF.
They found a loophole.
Yeah, so if it wasn't a staking ETF, then it becomes a security. Whoops, that's Adrian. Security, and you can't have an ETF. But if it's a staking ETF, then it's sort of like it falls out of this. Anyway, so they did this. And my thoughts here are, and again, another hot take, I don't know if this is true or not, but I think the SEC saw what they did.
Just go for it, Nick.
Yeah. So this is exactly what happened. No, I reckon the SEC saw this thing happening, and basically these guys sort of built this thing, got a product in, and essentially people can now buy a Solana ETF, not the way that the SEC really wanted it to happen. So they're like, man, we better like sort out our proper Solana. We don't want everyone just pumping through this weird little black hole. We want them doing it properly, like through the standard. So that's my thoughts on why they're suddenly like speeding up the process at the moment.
Right, let's close the loophole.
Yeah,
let's make the official channel.
That's all just made up.
Sources, I made it up, bro.
Sources, yeah, I made it up. That sounds reasonable, doesn't it?
Yeah. Research that one, folks.
Do your own
Fact
research.
checkers, do your business. Okay, so the South China Morning Post. So Hong Kong to tokenize bonds.
Yeah, so they've been doing this for a little while now. I think this is like the third sort of release of bonds that they've done. Interestingly, they're only tokenizing green bonds, i.e., like bonds that aren't bad for the environment in some way.
Okay, so like I don't know, bonds to invest in solar panels.
There's a framework. It's like an international framework about how you can have a green bond. You can only get called a green bond if you do a certain number of things, and so these are all these bonds that follow this framework to be green. Okay. But yeah, Hong Kong decided, you know what, we're going to use them as a test bed for tokenization. And yeah, it sounds like it's going so well that they're basically pushing forward with the third release. So the first release was kind of piloty. The second release was much bigger to a lot more players. And now the third release, they're like, yeah, we're loving this thing. And so they're looking to do it for not just green bonds as well, but to open it up and tokenize everything. It sounds like.
I mean, tokenization, you remember how the internet loves this, particularly crypto. It loves jumping on whatever the most recent meme is. And right now, I guess the memes could have had ETFs. You could have had, like, tokenization was a thing. Now it's getting pushed aside for stablecoin adoption, and tokenization will be back at some point. Yeah. But the tokenization has been happening, and I'm certainly aware of even legal firms that were using blockchains to issue debt securities. Like, this is like going back 4 or 5 years ago before it was a hot topic, just because the process of gathering information and issuing a new instrument on a blockchain was just so much more efficient than me stamping a thing, sending it to my mate here.
Yeah.
He stuffs it up because there's like 4 people over there. One guy's on leave for a week, and then they send the paperwork over to this guy. Whereas you kind of like, you build a smart contract, which wouldn't allow the process to move until the information was verified and moved along. So it just meant the issuing of these, bonds or all kinds of financial instruments became so much more efficient because you couldn't proceed until like the steps had been verified and moved along. Yeah. As opposed to like going 4 steps back and going, someone didn't cross the T and dot an I like 3 steps ago. We've got to go back and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, but look, we're getting there's just definitely a lot more press on this now, and we're actually sort of seeing, I guess, a lot more examples of this happening. It's not just Hong Kong; it's a lot of places where you don't expect to find it. All right. Next one. So where are you up to? China Daily reporting that Chinese brokerages are gaining licenses, crypto licenses in Hong Kong. So a bunch of security firms, Guaotao Junan, I'm sure I pronounced that exactly correct. TF Securities. Did I get that correct? TF Securities and China Renaissance received SFC licenses. So their mainland linked ownership may enable cross-border crypto participation, even though crypto is still, I guess, technically banned in mainland China.
Yeah. This is kind of interesting as well. So the thing that caught my eye on this one actually was your well-pronounced Guotai Junan International. They're actually owned by the regulator. And this, I was like, what?
Okay.
Or partially owned at least by the regulator. I'm like, hang on. Like, can you imagine ASIC owning a company? And like a for-profit company? It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, apparently in China, this is a standard thing because they believe that all the checks and balances and they all report up through the same line and it's not a problem. But it doesn't, like in the Western world, it's just crazy to imagine a regulator owning a company and then allowing them to do some slightly sus regulatory activity.
Yeah.
Not sus, but they're kind of using this weird corridor through to Hong Kong to get things done. But yeah, it's. I mean, what they're doing here is that Hong Kong have always been on sort of the bleeding edge of Chinese regulatory landscape. So at the moment, the Hong Kong businesses can sort of do crypto stuff, assuming they get the proper licensing, whereas it's completely banned in China. So it's kind of really the opposite kind of sides of this thing. And Chinese companies are sitting there and going, all right, so we're allowed to, if we just sort of set up in Hong Kong, we can kind of do our stuff through there. And the regulator's like, yep. And so they're doing it. I mean, this kind of stuff happens fairly often with Hong Kong. Obviously, it's sort of, it always does, as I say, the bleeding edge stuff. So there are other regulatory activities that various other companies use. It's happened for derivatives, it's happened for OTC desks, it's happened for various other things. And yeah, they seem fine with it. I mean, unless there's this huge capital flight. So for those, who aren't sort of super down with the Chinese stuff, China really wants to control their currency. So they want to make sure the currency stays internal. You can't actually send, Chinese currency outside of the country. If you do, you're sort of playing with an offshore version of the currency that's, that's not actually, you can't send it to local banks in China. It's kind of this separate version.
Offshore. Oh,
yeah. But yeah, so if this new crypto thing that you can do through Hong Kong was to result in a huge capital outflow, then they'd probably put their foot down. If there was some kind of high profile scandal, maybe they'd put a stop to this stuff. But at the moment, it's pretty normal. It seems strange to us, I think, but it's pretty normal for those guys. And this is how these companies who are on the front foot and get this licensing in Hong Kong can make use of all this cool crypto stuff that none of the other guys can. It's such an advantage.
Absolutely. Yeah, okay. Well, we've seen Hong Kong kind of leading the way on this for a little while now, so we'll keep an eye on that. Okay, so news from, I guess, our second home, Singapore. From the MAS, Singapore has fined a number of banks over AML breaches involving crypto. So MAS has fined 9 banks for Australian $33 million for poor AML controls involving gambling and crypto. So Bitstamp just received a full license. Hang on.
Bitstamp.
Bitstamp. A Robinhood owned Bitstamp. Sorry.
You're talking about, I think, something else.
That's a separate point. So let's get through this first one. So I was just mindlessly reading from this sheet and paying no attention to whether it was related to the first point or not. So let's first of all deal with the fine here. So I believe it's had to do with some people repatriating gambling gains through crypto.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. Credit Suisse,
so the
Citibank.
Credit Suisse was the big one. They got the biggest fine of 5 mil Sing, but out of a total of 27 mil Sing, 9 banks getting like 3 mil average each. That's nothing. Like this is, I don't know. This
barely
is
a speeding fine, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. For those banks, that's nothing for a bank. But basically $3 billion. There's this whole inquiry. It's been an ongoing investigation for a few years, I think, and they've discovered this money laundering of about $3 billion Singapore dollars. So these $3 billion got laundered and the banks got fined 3 mil each. It's anyway.
A rounding error.
Yeah, basically. But
oh no! Some bonus. Some executive's not going to get his ivory back scratcher this year.
It's not all in crypto though. So I think most of the laundering was done in real estate and luxury goods and blah blah blah. But crypto kind of just appeared as well because some of the money was sent to various exchanges. Of course, not independent reserve. We caught it all and sent it straight back. But
excellent.
Yeah. But yeah, no. It's a wider point, I think, on how AML stuff is going to start tightening more and more and more. obviously we take it extremely seriously here. Like our regulations under the Monetary Authority of Singapore is very stringent in how we have to deal with this kind of stuff. And same in Australia. Like we're very careful about, you know, making sure that all the money coming through our system is clean and not just getting washed or laundered or whatever.
Yeah. The MAS is I mean, they're a pretty practical, level-headed regulator in general. I mean, they got their act together, generally speaking, and I mean, they're usually pretty good to deal with, and it's good that they're sort of making sure that this stuff is under control. So next thing they had a look at was Bitstamp. So Bitstamp out of the this is some more regulation stuff out of Singapore, I guess. Bitstamp just received a full license despite tightened oversight. So Singapore continues to, I guess, balance enforcement and innovation at the same time.
Yeah. So you touched on something else there, talking about Robinhood. I don't know if we can talk about that, but I thought that was an interesting story as well. So Robinhood now allow you to trade traditional stocks that have been tokenized. You don't actually get them in your MetaMask wallet or whatever, but the benefits here are that you can trade them sort of 24/7 basically. You can trade them down to like one euro worth. I think it's all based in euro. You need to be an EU resident. You can trade €1 worth, whereas normally like in the traditional stocks, you'd have to buy one share as the minimum kind of thing. All these kind of little fancy things that make trading a bit easier and more crypto-like. And they ended up, and they're using the blockchain for it. So they're using like Arbitrum, I think, at the moment, which is a Ethereum, another notch for Ethereum. And I think they're planning on making their own L2 at some point, but it'll still be, I guess, on Ethereum. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. Like it allowed them to use the blockchain in a way that people don't even know they're using it. You know, this is something we like us crypto guys talk about, you know, from the beginning was, you know, sometime in the future, you're going to be using the blockchain, you won't even know it. So, well, that's
I've said those exact same words in that exact same way many times.
Yeah,
yes.
Really, just like that.
Just like that.
With like the Batman voice.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Because no one... no, like quite literally. I mean, that's the reality is that most people will adopt it without even knowing they're using it. Yeah. Okay. I guess
did I cut you? Next one,
I'll come back to that. No, we touched on this earlier. So so we actually had so Australia now has its own. Let me introduce the next topic. So we're talking about Thailand. Thailand's DV8. So a company, which we'll get into in a second, is to become the regional Bitcoin treasury place. So we've seen this with MetaPlanet, obviously MicroStrategy or Strategy, as it's now called, leading the way. Australia's own Locate Technologies. We had Steve Sorenstein on. Orenstein. That's the third time I've stuffed up his name on camera. Sorry, Steve. We had a podcast with him, and I asked him. I just said, "Steve, how do I pronounce it? Is it Orenstein or Orenstein?" And he's like, "Orenstein," and I was like, "Steve Orenstein." And then I said, "Hey, we can edit this out." And I was thinking Jared would edit it out, but he didn't. He just let it play.
Context.
So anyway, sorry, Steve. Let's. I'll just call him something stupid next time. I'll start calling him Michael. I don't know. Anyway, so consortium plans to acquire DV8 Public Co and turn it into a BT treasury firm. So this, funnily enough, this includes MetaPlanet, which has become Asia's, I guess, version of Strategy. Sora Ventures, Cliff Capital, Moon Inc. and Asia Strategy. So Sora's Jason Fang has, I guess, outlined it as DV8 could be the next MetaPlanet. We all want to be the next MetaPlanet. I guess MetaPlanet wanted to be the next Strategy. And
exactly. Yeah. I know. I found that funny. They weren't even aiming for Strategy. They're like, no, let's just go for MetaPlanet. Like, Strategies, we can't be the next Strategy. I guess they felt like a bit of an advertisement. This one, to be honest. It's cool. What more can you say? Like more companies that are becoming treasury companies is, you know, gobbling up supply. So can't complain. We talked about this before as well. Like all of these ETFs gobbling up supply and a lot of activity on the OTC desk. People, seems like sort of the institutional side really just want Bitcoin at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so just more. Okay, and the last topic then we have before we discuss the party is the Bitcoin cycle peak. Bitcoin cycle could peak in October 1. Don't say that. According to analyst.
Yeah.
Pillows.
Oh wait, Ted Pillows.
Ted Pillows.
Damn you, Ted Pillows! Don't spoil the party just yet. Ted Pillows cycle chart predicts. Oh, he's a chartist.
Mm-hmm.
He's in Ted Pillows. Throw it out here. He's into technical analysis.
I got rid of that
Astrology for men strikes again.
To make things worse, he also talks about stock to flow.
Oh no!
And I was like, oh god. So I mean, for those of you who don't know, a long time ago, a guy called Plan B created this thing called stock to flow, which the idea there is that you sort of, you've only got this certain amount of Bitcoin coming into the system, which is through the block reward, and so you've got, that's kind of the flow, and you've got stock, which is how much is already existing in the system, and using only those two numbers, you can predict what the price is going to be. Annoyingly, for a long while, this was correct. But like the more you extrapolate it out, the more the price got to some silly numbers, according to this guy's, this Plan B guy's sort of modeling. And to anyone who'd sort of looked at it with more than half a thought, it was no surprise when this thing failed. And so everyone, and there's a lot of people, like this guy had millions of followers on Twitter. Like it was absolutely crazy, the number of followers. And it was kind of sad at the end. I think he started like spruiking his own like trading channel or something like that. Like he started off as this guy who was really above it all and wasn't in it for the money and had his own Bitcoin, sure, but he wasn't selling anything. He was just putting out these charts and making people love him. And then at the end it kind of all fell apart and it wasn't great. But
hey, where would the Bitcoin, where would our Plan B stock to flow model be today? Where?
Yeah, good question. No, that's a different stock to flow, I think. So this Ted Pillows fellow has come out with his own, which you can model it however you want. You can use you can put in different inputs and use different sort of formula to figure out how it all fits. But yeah, this guy's come out with this $370,000 Bitcoin number, and I'll take it. Don't get me wrong, like that'd be a great price that's US dollars as well, by the way. But yeah,
that'd be juicy.
I don't put any stock in that stock to flow.
Where would have we got? Is there anywhere we can pull it up at some point? The old Plan B stock to flow to see exactly. I'd be fascinated to know because the thing is, like, I guess his model had it kind of worked.
It worked until it didn't.
It worked until it didn't, like all guesses. It worked until it didn't, and then once it was broken, everyone kind of went, okay, get rid of that.
That's why I didn't make our newsletter.
So I didn't make a newsletter. So maybe we'll find that. So that's all the major news. But I guess the key thing for us, it's always going to be debated, right? I mean, we've seen the traditional 4-year cycle replay itself over and over and over again. And so October, November would be kind of where that model fits. That's just using previous cycles.
That's right. So it's like 35 months into the cycle from the previous lows, usually around where the high hits, which is, you're right, sometime later this year.
But I guess everything works until it doesn't. We've just discovered, thanks to Plan B. But like this time, we have seen a lot. The institutional adoption. We haven't seen quite the euphoric heights as we've had in previous cycles, for starters. So we haven't quite seen quite the run up. So it makes me think, well, who knows, right? Who knows what the future holds? But we haven't seen the adoption of people like Strategy and MetaPlanet and now DV8. Like I guess just as the emerging group of people who are starting to use the Bitcoin treasuries and just the broader access. I mean, access to crypto has never been more diverse. Like there are so many exchanges now. There's so many methods to access it. There's so many ways to hold it, which previously it was just through a few exchanges. So it seems to me like, okay, we're just in a different market. It's matured so much over the last 4 years that surely kind of what's happened before is maybe a useful indicative kind of guide, but at the same time, it can't continue on that way.
Yeah. No, it is funny as well because like a lot of these 4-year cycles, everyone sort of traditionally go, well, it's the halving that kind of is the catalyst for this kind of thing, which happens every 4 years. But there's always something else exogenous that plays a part and kicks it. So, it was the ETFs last time, and this time it's, the Treasury companies maybe, and like these things are all unrelated to the halving, yet they all seem to happen at the right time. It's just...
It's because we live in a matrix.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, yeah, it's a simulation. It finds a way somehow. Something will happen. Anyway, this is, the Treasury companies are clearly the big thing this time. The ETFs are kicking into high gear, but a lot of the Treasury companies will be using the ETFs, obviously. They're not all maxis like Sailor who will, self-custody and buy on exchanges. But,
interesting.
Number will go up.
All right. Well, that's the news. I've covered all the big topics. But importantly, as I said at the beginning of the show, we did have the Independent Reserve's 12-year anniversary, which in crypto years, in regular years, is what are we saying, 5 to 1?
Yeah, at least.
5 to 1. So that's kind of like being around for 50 years for
I mean, it's from the start, right? Almost from the start of an industry existing. Like, yeah, you can't measure that.
So, Adrian's not here, obviously, unless he's somewhere.
We tried to call me before, but
he did try and call me. But one of the most fascinating stories, and I guess because we're having a birthday special, at least that's why I'm calling it. Hey, look, they've got the balloons. The reason independent reserve started is rooted in the very origins of, like, I guess, almost, for example, like Mt. Gox was the reason independent reserve exists. So Adrian, at least the story I had heard, that his one of his co-founders, Adam Tepper, who sadly is not with us anymore, had introduced Adrian to the idea of Bitcoin. He looked at the white paper. Adrian, being a tech guy, looked at it, and they said, "Okay, let's go and try and buy some." So the story that I heard was that they set out to try and buy some on Mt. Gox, right? And the experience, and Mt. Gox was just an old, I guess, rejigged online card trading. So a bit of trivia: Mt. Gox stands for, Jared, Magic the Gathering, the exchange, right? Yeah. What? Yeah. So the guy, I can't remember his name, but he bought that. He's like, okay,
Mark Capelli's.
There we go. Like he decided, oh yeah, let's trade this Bitcoin thing. I don't know how to build an exchange. I'll just go buy one. So this thing just happened to be in Japan, where I guess Magic the Gathering, the card game, was big. So to buy Bitcoin back in those days, and everyone's heard of Mt. Gox, and of course it got hacked and it went down. And I think the distributions kind of went out. I'm not sure.
Different waves
that have gone out. But all the Bitcoin that was hacked and everything like that. But you had to actually go and set up. You had to find a way to get your dollars into yen, then yen into this exchange. Like the whole process was cumbersome, and kept breaking down, and like the website would go down and all this kind of stuff. And Adrian was like, this is a pretty shit experience. I'm pretty sure we could build a better exchange. And so they did, in effect, right? And they just built it. And, 12 years later, here we are.
Yeah.
Off the back of that experience. So, all these experiences kind of lead us on this Cambrian explosion of businesses and ideas and people venturing into the wild west of crypto. Yeah. That's my story. That's my birthday story.
Yeah. I was hoping for a present. Yeah, okay.
How was we had a great party. Actually, Jared was our DJ, and I saw Jared in a suit for the first time, and I didn't recognise him. So we were.
It wasn't a birthday suit.
It wasn't his birthday suit. It was an actual suit with no hat on, and I didn't recognise. Actually, I didn't recognise you. I guess he's not on the camera, so you can't recognise him probably either. But anyway, you just have to trust me on that one. But the party was good. We had a great time. We had a lot of friends over. This last Friday down the Rocks. It's a great night. I think everyone had a good time, and thanks to everyone for supporting us for 12 years. And here's to another 12.
It's good. Good party. Are we done? Or is that a sign off?
Okay. All right. See you.
Okay. Bye.